evening, everyone. I am Richard Medina, your council president. I am calling this meeting to order, regularly scheduled meeting for Tuesday, November the 13th, the year 2018. Let us all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, roll call of attendance.
First District Councilwoman Myrna Maldonado.
Present.
Second District Councilman Lenny Francisci.
Present.
Third District Councilwoman Brenda Walker. Present. Fourth District Councilwoman Christine Vasquez. Fifth District Councilman Robert Garcia.
Present.
Sixth District Councilwoman Gilda Orange.
Present.
Councilman at Large Emiliano Perez.
Present.
Councilman at Large Kenneth Monroe.
Present.
Councilman at Large Richard Medina.
Present. First item on the agenda.
Minutes, regular meeting, Monday, October 22nd, 2018.
So moved, Mr. President.
Second.
Motion on the floor by Councilman Garcia, properly second by Councilwoman Orange. To hear the minutes for the regular meeting, Monday, October the 22nd. Any questions on that motion?
Yeah, that's yours.
Madam Clerk, roll call.
Maldonado,
Yes.
Francisci,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Garcia,
Yes.
Orange,
Yes.
Perez,
Yes.
Monroe,
Yes.
Medina.
Yes. Motion carried. Next item.
Communications from department heads. Accounts payable warrant 111318BD, accounts payable warrant 111318CC, accounts payable warrant 111318LA.
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor by Councilman Francisci, properly second by Councilwoman Maldonado. To hear account payable warrants listed for November the 13th. Any questions on the warrants? Roll call to accept the warrants.
Maldonado,
Yes.
Francisci,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Garcia.
No.
Orange.
Yes.
Perez,
Yes.
Monroe,
Yes.
Medina.
Yes. Motion carries. Next item.
Payroll warrant biweekly 101918. Payroll warrant biweekly 110218. Payroll warrant monthly 110118.
So moved, Mr. President.
Second.
Motion on the floor by Councilman Garcia, properly second by Councilwoman Walker. To hear payroll warrants as listed in today's agenda. Any questions on the payroll warrants? Roll call to accept payroll warrants.
Maldonado,
Yes.
Francisci,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Garcia,
Yes.
Orange,
Yes.
Perez,
Yes.
Monroe,
Yes.
Medina.
Yes, that motion carries. Do we have any committee reports?
Mr. President.
Councilman Garcia.
We have Ms. Marino here at the Department Head Communications.
Mr. Marino.
Mario Solorio, Planning and Economic Development Director. I was asked to come to this meeting to discuss, I guess, some questions that you guys had on bike trails. Specifically, I have given you just, the first map is a bike trail that has been approved by the state. We have funding for it through NERC. And then really the last map is just kind of a generalization of where we hope to have bike trails, pending some studies that might need to get done to make sure that they're safe and adequate. And that's really just kind of our hopes. It hasn't been updated since we don't have a GIS person on staff right now. And so this is probably like 1 year old. What I did is I went on paint, and anything you see in yellow, I've kind of annotated that as kind of new to this year. So I'm not sure if whoever has any questions, I can go through that.
Councilman Garcia.
Yes, I want to thank Marino for coming, and giving us this information. I'm pretty sure everybody, like myself, got a million calls of reference, what's that going along Columbus Drive. So when I called Marino, he told me it was a bike trail, and he volunteered to come to the meeting. Is that the first phase that's on Columbus Drive?
It is. So that leg right now, where it ends is Alder and Klein Avenue. And then there's going to be a pedestrian bridge, it's a multi-purpose bridge that will connect you to the other side to cross over Columbus Drive safely. And then that, from Klein Avenue, we left it as kind of like a cul-de-sac for future purposes if it goes north or south. We envisioned that eventually bikes would be a mode of transportation and not just used for recreation around the city. But that specific bike trail would connect to Butternut and go to Sunnyside Park, outside Sunnyside Park, and head towards Guthrie, head all the way to Michigan off of Linear Park, Michigan, head to Euclid, and then Euclid is, as you know, we've put a bike trail through there that gets you all the way to Chicago Avenue. So that kind of creates a loop pretty much in the harbor.
Because I thought it might have been like a trail throughout the city, or, just like what you're doing. So that trail's going to just connect to the bike trails that's painted on the streets?
Well, correct. So eventually, all the trails, whether they're asphalt or painted on the street, will eventually all connect throughout the whole city, both East Chicago and Harbor, to get people in and out of the area.
But I understand on Butternut, right there on Columbus Drive, are they going to put a light there?
There will be like a hawk signal type.
Yeah, to me, I think that's going to be dangerous if we could get everybody to just go down to the pedestrian bridge, because if you have a flashing light there, you have some kids there, kids are just going to go, and I think that's going to be a dangerous spot, but if we could have them go to the pedestrian bridge, it'd be a lot better. But a flashing light there, kids would be kids, they'll go out.
So unfortunately, right now, what we've realized is that they're already doing that. So there's already people crossing from that neighborhood to Columbus Drive, and what we're trying to do is provide a way for them to do it more safely, I guess. If you looked at what we did in the medians also to kind of help with, so it's kind of like an island that they can, not have to cross the full length all the way through. And then, once they get to that side, they can go now on this multi-purpose trail that will take them to, whether they need to go to Block Junior High or the library. Because there's not enough space on the north side between the ditch and putting that multi-purpose trail. There wouldn't be enough for the water to evacuate the way it needs to, so you'll have flooding, which is why we opted to put it on the other side. But it was based on a need, because we saw that a lot of people were crossing, irregardless, to what's going on right now. They are crossing that way towards like Block and the library, and so it was a way to kind of try to help with that.
Yeah, my fear is, these cars are just going so fast just to get out of the town, from BPE and Mattel and all these other companies. We had one senior lady that got hit by Walgreens years ago, roughly 5 years ago, if I think that. These guys just speeding out of town, and when they get to that area right there, they just hitting so fast, and my concern is that some of these kids crossing that area, so. When's the second phase is gonna begin?
It all really is kind of based on, as the streets are being redone, if they're on this map that shows like, okay, we need to investigate whether a trail would fit, then we kind of proceed that way so that we let the architects and engineers let us know whether that's even feasible. So in terms of the connection, Guthrie is being redone now. And so part of that Guthrie is the reconstruction of the trail on Linear Park. So maybe within 5 years, I would say you'd be able to see kind of that full connection, because the pedestrian bridge is not happening till next year and being completed the following year after that, which is like 2019, 2020. So I would say within 5 years, you'll pretty much see all these pieces start following together in terms of connectivity.
Any suggestions of going north and going along the Grand Calumet?
There is, so currently the sheet that you have in front of you is the first phase of what has been funded to take us from the Hammond Trail that would eventually connect you to Crown Point or Wolf Lake, Chicago. It will take you through the Roxana South Side corridor, kind of hugging Kosciuszko Park, down the boulevard, across the boulevard, heading towards Kennedy. And then there's a second phase that we've applied for that will take you from Kennedy on the Hammond side and will take you towards Gary, towards the airport.
Is that gonna be a trail?
That is a trail, correct.
When is that supposed to start?
This one is supposed to start next year in terms of the one that you have currently in your possession. The second phase, we haven't been approved it yet, so that is pending funding from NERC.
I got no further questions. I just want to thank you. That's a great project, though.
Do we have any more questions for Mr. Moreno? Thank you, sir.
All right, no problem, thank you.
Do we have any board reports?
No.
No board reports. Madam Clerk, first ordinance.
Ordinance on first reading, ordinance 18-0020, sponsor Councilwoman Myrna Maldonado, Councilman Rich Medina, Councilman Robert Garcia, and Councilman Emiliano Perez. An ordinance correcting a scrivener's error within ordinance 18-0019, fixing the salaries of police and fire personnel of the city of East Chicago, Indiana for the year 2019.
So moving first and second reading, Mr. President.
Mr. President, members of the council, before there's action on the motion of Councilman Garcia, wish to advise the council this is a very simple ordinance. Its only purpose is to correct a typographical error that was in the prior ordinance that was passed last month. Prior ordinance erroneously listed the fire department line captain and fire department staff captain biweekly salary as $2,465.61 with the 2% raise that you approved. The correct salary line item should have been $2,456.61. The 65 was erroneously listed in place of the 56. All the salary does is it says that the salary for that position is the correct amount, $2,456.61. So if the council wishes to do so, it may consider the matter and suspend rules. And if you wish to do so, you could pass all three readings tonight.
Mr. Buscemi, will the state recognize this correction, being that it's after November the 1st?
I believe that they will. We've specifically provided that the effective date of the ordinance is retroactive to the passage of the other ordinance, October 22, 2018.
Okay, we have
It's a very minor mathematical error of $5.
my concern is just the dates that we're taking
Yes.
action on.
They will honor it as effective by the deadline for the council to take action on police and fire salaries.
Okay, does the chair have a second on that motion?
Second.
Motion on the floor by Councilman Garcia, properly second by Councilwoman Orange. To hear ordinance 18-0020 on first and second reading. Any further questions on this ordinance? Madam Clerk, roll call to accept on first and second reading ordinance number 18-0020.
Maldonado?
Yes.
Franceschi?
Yes.
Walker?
Yes.
Garcia?
Yes.
Orange?
Yes.
Perez?
Yes.
Monroe?
Yes. Yes, that motion carries.
Motion to suspend the rules here in third and final reading.
There's a motion on the floor by Councilman Garcia to suspend the rules on ordinance 18-0020. Questions on suspending the rules? Roll call to suspend the rules on ordinance 18-0020.
Maldonado?
Yes.
Franceschi?
Yes.
Walker?
Yes.
Garcia?
Yes.
Orange?
Yes.
Perez?
Yes.
Monroe?
Yes.
Medina?
Yes.
Mr. President, make a motion third and final reading.
Motion on the floor by Councilman Garcia to hear ordinance number 18-0020 on third and final reading. Do we have a second?
Second.
Probably second by Councilman Monroe. Questions on that motion? Roll call to accept on third and final reading ordinance 18-0020.
Maldonado?
Yes.
Franceschi?
Yes.
Walker?
Yes.
Garcia?
Yes.
Orange?
Yes.
Perez?
Yes.
Monroe?
Yes.
Medina?
Yes, that motion carries. Next item?
There are no ordinances on second reading. Ordinances are on third reading. Ordinance 18-0017, sponsor Mayor Anthony Copeland, an ordinance to amend and restate the City of East Chicago sewer user ordinance and regulations.
So moved.
Second, Mr. President.
Motion on the floor by Councilman Monroe, properly second by Councilman Garcia to hear ordinance 18-0017 on third and final reading. Questions on the motion? Councilman Garcia.
I see we have the representative from the department here. If they could come forward and, we had some council people that were absent that day. If you could explain this ordinance in its entirety, we appreciate it.
Sure. Hello, council persons. This sewer user ordinance is amended to address ongoing work that we've had with US EPA. The sanitary district had, as part of a consent agreement order in 2014, was required to update the sewer user ordinance as well as our enforcement response plan. The amendments that you see here in the sewer user ordinance are to make our ordinance complete with the Code of Federal Regulations used by US EPA. We have updated various definitions throughout the sewer user ordinance. We've increased the fines to the appropriate minimum as they're stipulated by US EPA. And we've also taken the opportunity to amend our local limits. The last time they were amended was in 2007, and there were some errors in the specific discharge limits. And we reviewed those with new data, with the discharges that we received from residential, commercial, industrial, and industrial users throughout the thing. So we took the time to correct and revise, amend our local limits. And what you see in front of you is the result of the local limit study, as well as the agreements that we've made with US EPA. US EPA has received a copy of the sewer user agreement, the amended enforcement response plan, and the separate local limit study, and they have verbally approved all of the changes that we have made, contingent upon, and they will give us final approval contingent on us adopting by ordinance these changes. So we ask for that passage.
Councilman Garcia.
Mr. President, yeah, last meeting, you went in pretty in-depth into the explanation. There's two things I asked for you, is to explain the limits, then also you can explain to the council how this pertains to the city as water comes into sanitary, we treat it, then we release it back into the Grand Calumet. So
Yes.
if you could explain it like you explained it that first time,
No problem.
also with arsenic and everything else, I greatly appreciate it.
We'll do it. Well, as part of the district's work, we operate our wastewater treatment plant, which discharges into the Grand Calumet River. We have to operate that in accordance with our own permit, the MPDS permit that is issued by IDEM, and that program is overseen by US EPA. So we have established discharge limits for the wastewater treatment plant operated by the city of East Chicago. Also, part of that operation, and which is part of our sewer user ordinance, is there is a pre-treatment program, which I am the compliance manager for. We are required to inspect and sample and monitor the performance of our industrial users throughout the city. To date, we have 25 industrial users that we issue a specific permit for their operation. Those permits run for 5 years. We conduct enforcement monitoring. Rather than doing self-policing where the industrial customers do their own sampling on a monthly basis, and even though we were trying to change it to that type of program and us doing spot checks on it, here the city personnel, our pre-treatment assistant and our pre-treatment coordinator sample each industrial user on a monthly basis, minimal, to make sure that they are complying with the discharge standards that are in place for those industrial users. Our industrial users primarily they all must meet our local limits, which is what we're asking you to approve in this amended SUO. And there are also 5 significant industrial users, and they're also classified as categorical industrial users. And those specific industries have specific standards that are established at the federal level, which we include in their permit. As part of our pre-treatment program, again, we monitor their performance. We collect our samples. Once we receive those results, any exceedances of those samples, those people are issued a notice of violation. The fines are set as a minimum of $1,000 per occurrence, and they may increase up to $2,500 based on depending on the discharge volume that industrial user emits on a monthly basis. With some of the changes, we've had a set number of contaminants of concern, pollutants of concern. We have a list of 15 that were identified by US EPA that were included on all the permits. And then based on historical sampling, there were additional contaminants that were concerned based on, again, past results. So there were, during this local limit study, we looked at 20 different contaminants. They range from various inorganics, metals, iron, lead, arsenic, molybdenum, selenium, zinc, copper. We have cyanide. Then we look at oils and greases. And we also have surcharge parameters for total solids and for CODs, when those are surcharges that are applied because of the extra costs that we have with addressing them at the treatment plant, the additional costs that we get from our own operating expenses. Each one of those industrial permits, again, users must meet their local limits, or the city's local limits that we impose on them in that permit. And if not, NOVs are issued and fines are collected accordingly.
Garcia?
Yeah, after you treat that water that comes from the industry, is it totally clean, or is it some type of amount of lead, arsenic that's still in the water? That's still in the water, and you discharge it back into the Grand Calumet?
There are concentrations and detectable concentrations of elements of the contaminants still in our water. However, again, our MPDS permit puts that same onus on us that we have to meet set discharge limits. So we are monitored, we do our self-monitoring of our effluent to make sure and document that we are maintaining the acceptable, appropriate level of treatment before we discharge into the Grand Calumet River.
Did we lower any standards for industry?
Did we lower any standards? We raised the concentrations that they are able to meet And primarily, there was one contaminant of concern, cyanide, which we had talked at the last meeting, which that particular standard was improperly developed back in 2005 when the last local limit study was done. And so in order to correct that and remove a burden to some small industries here that were actually getting in, we were forced to fine these people $1,000 each time they had an occurrence. And their occurrences, even with low-level concentrations, they were ultimately receiving a fine and placed the burden on some small industries here in the city.
What industries was that?
Central States Marketing is a small manufacturer. They do straws. They are not a source of cyanide. There are a few others, Electric Coating, National Processing, and these are industries that we don't have a source of cyanide related to their operations or anything else. It's just that the previous local limit was basically at the analytical method detection limit, which the level was so low to be detected in the lab, it was not a proper discharge limit. The detection limit for cyanide was 0.003 parts per million. We were having to fine people when it was 0.004. The local limit that we're proposing is 0.019. You can see it's an order of magnitude higher than what was incorrectly applied back in 2007 when it was adopted.
Yeah, my concern is that here, we're letting them pollute more, that we have to treat more.
We're able to meet the level of treatment for cyanide as well as all the other parameters. We are meeting our discharge limits.
And that is at zero?
No, the discharge limit for cyanide is not zero. The permit level that our plant needs to meet is they have a monthly discharge limit of 0.0085 as a monthly average, and reverse that. They have a monthly average of 0.0043 on a monthly basis when we average the results of our effluent, and there's a daily max of 0.0085 as a daily max, and we need to meet that, and we have met that the last 2 years. I can have data for that.
Yeah, I just hate because the cities has had no environmental justice at all. References our city, third district. Is the first thing that pops in our minds here. The cumulative effect that all this industry has here, BP, Amoco, Mattel, you got all this industry here that that's polluted the area, you know. And I just hate to hear we're in the process of cleaning the Grand Canyon. We're dredging it, getting all that sediment out, and here we are getting material from company, cleaning it. It's not 100%. We're discharging it right back into the Grand Canyon. It's something that we're trying to clean, and that's
But again, the purpose of the NPDES permit that we're operating under is set by US EPA and IDEM so that they are protective of public health and the environment. They are looking at both public health exposure concerns of the water as well as the sediment and the ecological events on the fish and wildlife in the area. That's how those numbers are developed in our NPDES permit. The local limits, particularly with cyanide, that was one number that had been improperly calculated in 2005. That correction needed to be made. We've also looked at all the other ones since we were looking at changes that we've seen since 2005 when the last study was done. There's changes in the quantity of flow that we have, the industries themselves, what type of flows they have, and what chemicals and everything, processes that they're using. So that all that was taken into effect to revise the standards. Our goal, we're still held to the same NPDES limit that we've been operating on. Even our previous NPDES permit from 2011 had these same standards that we need to meet. And we are constantly monitoring our plant on a daily basis to meet that.
You have a hard job, and it's got to be very hard under this present administration that we have in the White House that's eliminating a lot of EPA standards, a lot of injustice that's happened here in the city, because I'm pretty sure when they built them plants or within the third, EPA says it's okay, go ahead and build. and look what happened there. But I don't have faith in the EPA that's looking out for our best interests. I'm not saying you're not. I know you have our best interests, and I know you do a good job, and you're doing the best you can. My thing is here, we're treating water that's coming dirty to us, and we're letting it, we treat it, releasing it back to the Grand Calumet, which is dredging and trying to clean up. I stay in my
Again,
piece.
our goal is that we're meeting the NPDES permits put on us. We work to improve that. Fortunately, we've had very few exceedances, excursions. One of the difficulties in running a wastewater treatment plant is you never know what's coming into your plant on a daily basis. So we look at historical data, we look at trends, but we can't stop the flow into the Grand Cal River. We need to process that water as it comes in. The type of plant that we have, which we come in, it's a biological plant. We do oxidation. We recycle the materials that were already treated in our plant, and they're circulated in our oxidation ditch to let bacteria treat the waste that we have there. From that step, it goes to a clarifier to let solids and everything settle out. Part of that solid settling out removes a lot of metal and other contaminants. They bind in the solids that are settled at the bottom of the tank, removed to a tank, dewatered, and sent to a landfill. The final step that we do filtration so that we don't have any fine particles to discharge. And then we are required to do oxidation we maintain a certain dissolved oxygen content in our discharge. And we also have to do disinfection, which we accomplish by using ultraviolet lights. And this plant, if you're familiar with it, 20 years ago when they switched from chlorination to ultraviolet lights, it was ultra clean water that was coming out there. You had fresh water sponges in the chambers. We haven't seen that, but I can tell you our discharge is very good. We haven't had any E. coli exceedances in the last 2 years. The fish and wildlife in our canal, salmon, are still coming upstream into our plant. It's good quality water. We've been in compliance with our NPDES permit for the last 2 years, and that's all we can strive to do until if we had more stringent requirements, we'd look at it and we'd also find a way to comply with it.
Just to let the rest of the council know, there's two industry that has their own treatment plant. That's BP Amical and Mattel, correct?
Yes,
And they do their own cleaning and they discharge into the Grand Calumet.
they have their own NPDES permits, which they have to respond to IDEM and US EPA according to their permit levels. But they do discharge to our plant as well. Water that is primarily non-contact cooling water, they do discharge under permits to our plant. So we do receive a significant volume of water from ArcelorMittal. We do not receive anything from BP.
How many times has ArcelorMittal been fined?
How many times have they been fined? This year, likely 0 this year. Last year, at the end of the year, one of their outfalls where they are doing apparently some closure activities at the plant itself, it seemed that they flushed a fair amount of water that created a lot of sediments that when we sampled had high metals, and they paid a significant fine. The fines were on the order of $23,000, I believe, for the 2 events, for all the metals that they had exceedances in.
Do we have any further questions? Councilwoman Orange.
Who sets the fines?
Who sets the fines? That's in our sewer user ordinance and in our enforcement response plan. That was one of the issues that was lacking with our previous sewer user ordinance and enforcement response plan. The minimum fines were not consistent with US EPA's requirements. So now it is set for $1,000 minimal per occurrence. And then if it increases, if there's, depending on the range of what their daily discharge is, the volume of water that is discharged. So it can be anywhere from $1,000, $1,500, or $2,500 for a particular violation.
Well, I'm not crying for Mattel, $1 billion industry. $23,000 is not anything. I mean, I understand what you're saying, that we could possibly put a small business out of business because of $1,000, but Mattel, my heart doesn't bleed
No,
for them
no.
whatsoever.
And like I said, it was a fine appropriate with their volume, and for each contaminant that was exceeded was fined. They did not get any break or any type of repose for, or break from their fine. They paid the full amount. Our concern, as we've been talking last time, was more about cyanide. We've had a lot of exceedances. Majority of our exceedances that we have in the pretreatment program are involving cyanide. We only really have 2 to 3 industries that historically discharged portions of cyanide, and where we would expect to see, potential excursions. The rest of the fines that we've had to place on people are not sources, do not use cyanide in their production. It's something that shows up, and it shows up basically as a small exceedance. Like I said, we're talking at 3 parts per million, and or 0.003 parts per million, and we're finding it at 0.004, and that's where EPA says we have to issue a fine. And it's companies that don't have, like I said, any source, and they're ultimately having to pay a fine of $1,000, which is just an analytical, the way analyses work. There's a % recovery. They can be low or high, but it's within an acceptable range. And because it's so close to the detection limit, people are unfairly getting fined with this standard as it's written.
You have to remember you working for East Chicago. You ain't working for them companies. But the only thing, a lot of times those companies would rather pay a fine and keep doing what they're doing, and I hope that's not the case. But
No, we're here to comply with everything that was a shortcoming in years past with regard to our enforcement, our pretreatment program. We're correcting various omissions and errors that were not in our sewer user ordinance before. So these corrections are to make it more strict and in compliance with US EPA's requirements.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions? Councilman Garcia?
Yes, you said you're raising the limits on some, correct?
Yes, correct.
That's, is that past EPA standards or still below EPA standards?
The way it works is that we are monitored by what we discharge into the Grand Cal River. So the local limits, when we do our local limit study and appropriate them for our industries, we still have to make sure our plant meets those limits. But then we go and this is what their flow is, comparison to overall, what our total flow is through the plant. And we look at that and we find out what our plant is capable of handling. There's also a factor of safety in each one of those. When we do those calculations, we do put a factor of safety in there depending on how confident we are that we're able to treat that particular pollutant. Like I said, a lot of the metals and stuff settle out when we remove our solids, and that's where that is taken care of in our treatment plant. With regard to cyanide, we don't have a specific cyanide removal program, and it's not one that really shows up as far as this is what we see at the influent and this is what we see at the effluent. Some literature allows for up to 80%. You could take an 80% difference, saying that that's what a typical biological plant will remove. In our case, we did not go that high. We went very conservative because our own historical data shows that we have limited removal of cyanide by any of our processes. But what we did do is look at it. We went consistent with EPA guidance for what is on our outfall end, and based on the flows and equally distributed to our industries and treating each and every industry the same, we came up with the number, and that applies to all the other parameters that we changed.
So we was letting the company do this much discharge. They were doing this much discharge. Now we're gonna allow them to discharge more of lead or arsenic or whatever it is. So we just
Their limit will change, yes. The cyanide is one large one. The local limit study, yeah, there's been slight increases, but it's nothing that would cause us at our wastewater treatment plant to cause any problem or have any exceedance at the back end of our plant, which is overriding concern that we have.
You have a difficult job to do, and it's just hard in the city that we have, and as much as this justice we had in the city about environmental, it's hard for me to swallow that, so that's all I got to say.
I'm sympathetic to that. It's just that, again, science has to come in here, and again, you don't want to stop industry from coming in without having a reasonable limit. We can look at neighboring communities where Hammond, they don't have a cyanide discharge limit, for a local limit to apply to any of their industries, because all they have to do is report quarterly on what their discharge is at their plant, whereas we have to monitor ours on a regular basis, monthly, and report that. So we are constantly being monitored, whereas Hammond, Gary, two similar facilities, same discharge point, do not have that in their own NPDES operating permit. So you don't want to be economically disadvantaged when you're trying to draw industry to brownfield sites. You want to be able to compete on a level field.
I'd rather be healthy than economically healthy, so.
But
my
that's
health
the
and the health
basis of the science behind
Yeah.
what's in our NPDES permit and what's
no trust.
allowable.
Yeah. I'd rather be healthy, the community be healthy, than be economically viable, so.
Any further questions? Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Very much.
Madam Clerk, roll call to accept on third and final reading ordinance number 18-0017.
Maldonado. Yes. Franceschi.
Oh, yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Garcia.
No.
Warren.
Yes.
Perez.
Yes.
Monroe.
Yes.
Medina.
Yes. Motion carries. Next item?
We do not have any resolutions.
The floor is now open to old business. Do we have any old business? Let's move on to new business. Do we have any new business? Councilman Monroe.
Yeah, Mr. President and Council, I suppose there's been a couple of people here today, and I guess they've been talking about it. If we can get some type of information on Superior that's using our fire stations, that's working for the
Ambulance service?
ambulance service, what they're complaining about, had a gentleman had an accident on Columbus and Grand Boulevard.
Yes.
Yeah, Parrish. And they charged him $1,500 to give him a ride to the hospital. Now, he was supposed to bring the paper and be here today, but, Mr. Bichetti, is there any way that we can find out, or not say, find out how they're charging, because he had no vitals, no nothing, and they just gave him a ride to the hospital. It's $1,500. And then I had a couple other comments from some elderly people that's almost the same thing. So is there any way that we can look into that, sir?
Absolutely. Is Superior Ambulance the EMS provider for the city under
Yes.
contract with
Yeah.
the city at this time?
Yeah, and they're using our firehouses and
Have we,
stations.
in issuing the contract to them, has the city specifically established a specific rate and schedule for the fees that they may charge for the service?
Well, see, that's what I would like to look into.
Or do we leave the discretion to those charges to Superior? Does anyone know?
It's a very good question.
In this case, your understanding is it was a relatively routine transport, but the bill was $1,500?
Yeah, for, a block and a half, 2 blocks,
And the bill was $1,500?
1,500. And then a couple other elders was also, ran through the same thing for a while.
You can get me a copy of that particular bill.
I can get that to
An
you
excessive bill, then I can
tonight,
contact
tomorrow.
Superior Ambulance and then provide a response for you.
Okay, I
Can we
get that to you.
request their billing schedule,
Sure.
perhaps? I'm familiar with the incident that Councilman Monroe was speaking of, and it was basic life support, not advanced life support, no IVs, nothing of that nature. It does seem to be excessive. However, we don't know unless we have our billing schedule, so we could probably get our hands on that. We could answer our own question.
I can get you the billings right away.
I'll I'll get that, Mr. President. Also.
Great. Great. Do we have any further new business? Councilman Garcia?
Yes, Elliot, if you could send a letter to the engineer's office. We got speed bumps here by the park by City Hall, then also by Kosciuszko Park. And then there's no reflective painting on it. When you go by the hospital and you go down there, it has stop. It has reflective paint on the speed bumps. If we could have the same thing here by City Hall Park and by Kosciuszko Park on the speed bumps, I'm pretty sure the residents will like that.
Any further new business? I received a email with the opening positions on the boards from Elida. I'm sure you all received the same. Am I correct? Did anybody not receive that email? I don't have the list on me. However, we do have some board appointments open. We have an opening date and a closing date. Do we have those dates on hand?
It opened November 1st and closed the 30th.
Great. So anyone interested in any of these openings there to submit resumes to HR? Elida will be collecting those. Once she's gathered all those interested, which is by Friday, November the 30th, then we'll proceed with the selection amongst us. Also, the next council meeting is the 26th of November. We make note that in December, our first regular scheduled meeting will be on the 10th of December. I am calling for a special meeting on the 17th, the following Monday, so that the city could provide us with all or any closing material for the year. The normally scheduled meeting, I don't think we're going to have a quorum. It is in the middle of the holiday week.
I'll be in town.
You'll be in town? Okay. So I don't foresee us having that meeting. However, make note that on the December 10th and the 17th, we will be meeting. Have the clerk's office make sure that all department heads know of our last meeting of the year. Any more further new business? Let's move on to public expression. I'd like to remind those speaking before us today to try and keep your comments to 3 minutes. We will start with Thomas Frank.
Thank you. My name is Thomas Frank. I live at 1616 East 142nd Street. I'm here on behalf of Calumet Lives Matter, been addressing the issues in the Superfund site, the USS Lead Superfund site. Calumet Lives Matter had done a lot of work initially with bringing out hundreds of people and getting legal support for the community and working on relocation issues and also escalating issues with the governor to get emergency funds that really started to provide lead service lines or the replacement of lead service lines to the residents in the Calumet region. We're here today with my colleagues. We've shifted our focus away from managing issues with the EPA and the Superfund side, and the concerns with Calumet Lives Matter today and moving forward and for the last several months has been with redevelopment of Calumet. The city has done a great job in redevelopment in a lot of other areas. The last 5 years, I think we've seen more and positive movements going forward than we've seen in the last 50 years. Calumet and the Calumet neighborhood has unfortunately not seen much development and has not seen any, in fact, and we're really trying to advocate. We've been trying to get a meeting with the mayor and the city planner, Mr. Marino, for the last 6 months. You have some data a timeline with some of our exchanges. We're really concerned because when we escalated the issues for the emergency declaration for the governor to provide funds for the Superfund site, we also advocated for the Moving Forward project to be dedicated to Calumet. That'd be the hardest hit neighborhoods in the state of Indiana. And the governor signed that with the intention of the Moving Forward funds, which would be as much as $100 million dedicated to Calumet. Unfortunately, we have heard from Mr. Marino and else that some of those funds may perhaps actually go in elsewhere, that maybe the EPA hasn't met some deadlines. We've been in conversations with the EPA. They seem to be confused by Mr. Marino's declaration that they have not met some deadlines. We've also been in conversation with the Indiana Community Development and Housing, Mr. Sipes, and he was unaware of the funds perhaps moving in a different direction and are committed to Calumet. What we would love to have happen, Calumet Lives Matter would love to have happen, is that we move forward together, that there's transparency, that Calumet Lives Matter, which has done so much for this neighborhood, is included in the conversations in the redevelopment of Calumet. That's a very positive thing. I think there's been a lot of positives. I love the conversations, the questions by our Councilman Garcia on environmental justice. Environmental justice is what we are as a community. These are the frameworks that will move us forward in a lot of things. A lot of communities have been oppressed, and I think Calumet is, along with New Edition and some other community neighborhoods, really need some of our attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Bullock. Is that Clemay?
Yes. Yes, it's Clemay. I am a member of Calumet Lives Matter. Do you ever want to go home? Ask one person of another. It's the century of the displaced person. You can never go home. This quote echoes the situation my community has been put in this city. Good evening. Once again, I am Clemay Bullock, and I am a lifelong resident and active member of the Calumet community right here in East Chicago for however much longer the city will allow it to be there. I'm here tonight to express the immense frustration I feel about the decisions that appear to continue to be made on behalf of my community instead of in conjunction with my community as they should be. The Calumet community is without a doubt and has always been a tight-knit, family-oriented, loving, and nurturing community where everyone knows everyone and watches out for one another, as I'm sure Councilwoman Walker, or as I call her, Granny Brenda, has told you all. We're a family that was left deeply fragmented by the displacement of 1,200 residents due to lead contamination. The residents reluctantly left under the impression that the land would be remediated and returned to its tight-knit residential state, but instead we recently learned that the land is instead intended to be sacrificed to industry, as we always suspected it would be, but were gaslighted into thinking otherwise. The decision to turn the land over to industry is one community members would have never agreed to. To add injury to insult, after deeming Zone 1 unlivable, students were pushed out of the neighborhood school, which too sat on the same contaminated land as the housing projects. The residential land wasn't good enough for the topsoil to be removed and replaced so people could continue living there, but the land that the school sits on that was equally contaminated that school wasn't good enough for our kids, but it's good enough and safe enough for a church to lease it and for a future Christian school. Where was the community input in these decisions? Where was the heads up? We as a community are sick and tired of being stepped over and left out of decisions that affect us the most. Any decision made for a community without the input of the community will always fail. Just ask white America. We as a community are calling for the respect and consideration we deserve in any and every decision-making process that involves us. The community needs to be informed and engaged. That doesn't look like calling us out to meet with the city. That looks like coming to us and meeting us where we are and on our terms, because we are the people most affected by the city and the city's decisions. Thank you for your attention on this.
Thank you. Shirley Hunter.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sherry Hunter. I'm president of Calumet Lives Matter. I was disappointed, as she said, when I found out about them they took all these people off of this land because it was contaminated. But now they want to make it industrial. No more homes there, no more nothing. So they're going to bring industrial back into our community again. It just doesn't seem right. It's bad enough that you don't give us respect or you don't respond to our questions when we ask them. I've been trying to get a sit-down with the mayor for over a month. My last, and I have it in my purse, the receipt. I sent a certified letter to him so we can sit down and talk to him. He doesn't act. He doesn't respond to us. And we don't deserve that. We're part of East Chicago. And this is what we don't feel like you guys recognize us as part of East Chicago. Calumet and New Addition is the two black historical areas in East Chicago, and no one helps us at all. No one does anything for us. It's sad. And all we ask is just to help us like you would anyone else. I mean, the harbor is beautiful. We would like to look like that too. You know what I mean? Although part of those plants are pastric plants, but we would like to look like that too. They don't even come in there and do anything. The only one that help us in Calumet is EPA. They come in, they revitalize our grass, our yards. Their yards is beautiful. And even EPA said they didn't have to demolish those buildings. They could have did it just like they're doing in Zone 2. But the mayor said, no, I want them demolished. So I'm just asking for help. That's all we're asking for. Treat us the same way as you would treat us. You know what I mean? Don't disregard us as waste. Calumet been there a long time. There's a lot of history in Calumet. A lot of history. And you're going to let one person, your boss, take it from you? Take it from us? I don't think so. So we're not through with this. As far as Calumet Lives Matter, there is something out there coming your way. For one thing, that Moving Forward program, the governor signed. I was there. It was supposed to be implemented in the hardest hit area of East Chicago. He says, Calumet, Zone 2. I have the paperwork that says that. Plus, this mayor is so busy buying up property out there in Calumet. I have paperwork showing he's buying up property, not in the city's name, in his name. So I'm just letting you know, we're not blind, we're not stupid to what's going on out there. Thank you.
Do we have any more comment cards? The chair will now accept the motion to adjourn.
So move.
Roll call to adjourn.
Maldonado? Yes. Franciski?
Yes.
Walker?
Yes.
Garcia?
Yes.
Orange?
Yes.
Perez?
Yes.
Earl?
Yes.
Medina?
Yes, this meeting is adjourned.